Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to our opening reception for the exhibit, Telling a People's Story, African American Children's Literature. I'd like to welcome and thank our honored speakers, Jason Chin and Aqua Holmes. Thank you to the Vermont Humanities Council, Children's Literacy Foundation, the City of Burlington's Office of Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, Hotel Vermont, the Friends of the Fletcher Free Library, and the library staff for their hard work in support of this exhibit and all the associated programming. I'd also like to give a special thank you to our Programming and Partnerships librarian, Barbara Shatera, our Youth Services Manager, Megan Butterfield, and our Development and Communications Manager, Gail Batsom. They have all overseen all aspects of this exhibit and programming, and I'm grateful for all their hard work. So here are some titles of books that are highlighted in this exhibit. Freedom in Congo Square by Carol Weatherford, illustrated by R. Gregory Christie. Henry Freedom's Box, A True Story from the Underground Railroad by Ellen Levine, illustrated by Kadir Nelson. Duke Ellington, The Piano Prince and His Orchestra by Andrea Pinkney, illustrated by Brian Pinkney. The Book Itch, Freedom, Truth, and Harlem's Greatest Bookstore by Vonda Michaud Nelson, illustrated by R. Gregory Christie. I Love My Hair by Natasha Anastasia Tarpley, illustrated by E.B. Lewis. And Radiant Child, the story of young artist Jean-Michel Basquiat, written and illustrated by Javaka Steptoe. These are books that are part of this exhibit, and these are books that have been challenged or banned from classrooms, school libraries, or public libraries in the last couple of years. Right now, there are books on library shelves about Maya Angelou, Sojourner Truth, President Barack Obama, and about Martin Luther King's historic I Have a Dream speech that have also been challenged or banned from classrooms, school libraries, or public libraries in the last couple of years. In 2022, the American Library Association documented 1,269 demands to censor library books and resources. 90% of those challenges were done with multiple titles, and those are the challenges that were only reported. Libraries are institutions that keep history alive, including the American experience, the experiences of all Americans, including the African American experience. We keep books and information safe and accessible to everyone. We highlight books and information at times when it is important to do so. Whether in stories or in information, libraries vehemently uphold this tenet, along with other intellectual freedoms that are cornerstones to our democracy and our foundations for our shared humanity. We fight against censorship vigorously and passionately. This exhibit highlights African American experiences through the beautiful format of picture books. Some of the books we know are in peril of being withheld from readers. We are proud to host this exhibit and proud to put a spotlight on all these books that are important for all of us to learn and read. It is particularly important for young people to feel represented in the books they read. Picture books are one of the first opportunities of history and cultural about children that children are exposed to. Our mission here at the Fletcher Free Library is knowledge for all, knowledge for life. This exhibit, Telling a People's Story, African American Children's Illustrated Literature, raises awareness of social justice and the importance of Black authors and illustrators in children's literature. Now, I'd like to introduce Jason Chin, a celebrated illustrator and author of children's books, a resident of Vermont, and a good friend of the Fletcher Free Library. Jason's work has earned a Caldecott Medal, a Seibert Honor, and an Orbis Pictus Award. One of the picture books he illustrated, Pie is for Sharing, was the first book to launch our Burlington Story Walk in Leddy Park. And currently our book is one by Aqua Holmes, who illustrated Black is a Rainbow Color, and that's featured in our Burlington Story Walk right now at Leddy Park. So I'd like to welcome Jason to greet you and to introduce our keynote speaker.
A lot of cables down there. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm just giving an introduction, though. I don't know if I needed an introduction. So every now and again, I see a book that stops me in my tracks. With art that I just can't stop looking at. And this happened 8 years ago when I saw the book Voice of Freedom, Fannie Lou Hamer, Spirit of the Civil Rights Movement for the first time. I thought, this is incredible. Who made this? Who is this artist? It was, of course, Aqua Holmes. And I wasn't alone in my esteem for the book. It went on to garner a Coretta Scott King John Steptoe Award, a Seibert Honor, a Boston Globe Hornbook Award, and a Caldecott Honor, among many others. In fact, I went to Aqua's website earlier, and I saw the list of awards, and I just had to keep scrolling down and down. I counted them up, and I counted 23 awards and honors for that book. That's a lot of bling. And it was her first book. In the 8 years since, Aqua has illustrated many more books, garnering many more honors along the way, including 2 more Coretta Scott King awards. Her latest book is Hope is an Arrow, the story of Lebanese-American poet Khalil Gibran. And her next book, which I am very excited about, is Coretta, the autobiography of Coretta Scott King. I think she might be the front runner for one more Coretta Scott King award. In addition to being one of the most celebrated children's book illustrators working today, Aqua is an advocate for art and arts education. She is the commissioner and vice chair of the Boston Art Commission and the associate director at the Center for Art and Community Partnerships at Mass Art. She has created and led workshops, been a visiting artist and lecturer, and held artist residencies in public and private institutions throughout New England. I am so excited that she has taken the time to come to Burlington today to talk to us in what must be a very busy schedule. It's an honor to have her here. Please join me in welcoming Aqua Holmes.
I'm not sure which one of these I'm supposed to talk to. This one? The big one? Okay.
You got it.
All right. Good evening. I think it's evening. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. It's my pleasure to visit you in Burlington, Vermont. I think I've been here one other time in my life. Jason, thank you for the stellar introduction. I sometimes pinch myself still. As you'll see as I go through my slideshow, it's very surprising to me sometimes that I have this career in children's literature, but it is very precious to me to have this opportunity to talk to the future through books. I want to thank everyone at the Fletcher Free Library first for the invitation, and then for all the caring hands that went to put this together. We had a few bumps earlier with the technology, which I've gotten used to, but we were able to smooth everything out, and so I hope that when I hit that forward button that this is actually going to move forward, so bear with me. Okay. So, as I was saying, the exhibition Telling a People's Story was a great invitation that I received from Jason Shaman at Miami University in Ohio. I had a chance to see the actual artwork of my colleagues who I admire. For the most part, we're looking at each other's books most of the time. And the books, though they are magnificent, to see the original artwork is another level of enjoyment and understanding of what goes into making these works of art. Artists and authors pour their love of truth and community into these projects. It's not an accident that Jason works on the projects he works on, or that I work on the projects I work on. we're always looking for a place where we're going to have a voice that shines true. Great ones like Jerry Pinkney and Ashley Bryan left incredible footprints for us to follow. And talents like Oge Mora fire us up with new ways of looking at the world. So it means a lot to me to stand here. I'm standing on the shoulders of great men and women. Some of them as students, young people you've learned about in school, and some through the exhibition. But I always remember that great men and women are in my family and in my community too. My favorite heroes are local. All right, here we go. Yes, okay. My story begins here with my wonderful parents, Florence P. and O.C. Holmes, who raised an artist despite the warnings of friends and family. Back then, the common attitude towards artists was they don't make money, they go crazy, they never leave home, you know, things like that. And in 1965, well, I was born in 55, but you know, say 10 years into it when I really knew that I wanted to be an artist, I lost my point there for a minute. Black parents in particular, you know, the world was opening up in certain areas like law, medicine. So that's where you wanted your kids to be. You wanted your kids to be doing something that was connected to a paycheck. And artist was not one of those things. Now, neither of my parents were alive during this part of my life, but I always hope that in some universal divine principle, they're able to appreciate that they allowed me to be myself and didn't try to shoehorn me into another career, though they did suggest a few here and there. But anyway, at age 5, I declared my intention to be an artist. There were no role models at the time, but I knew in my soul that I would become one. So in the early years then, I spoke about this in 1965, there were only a few occasions where I saw art depicting Black people. I'm pretty sure that it wasn't a line item in our family, you know. It just wasn't. And not only that, but you just didn't run into artists everywhere. But each year there would be a new barbershop or gas station calendar. It was one of the highlights of going into the new year. And with my little imaginative mind, I would place myself inside of these photographs. So for instance, this little boy, he was my friend, and I would look at those pictures and imagine the kinds of things we would do together. Or I might imagine myself growing into be a great beauty like this woman on the left. There were also Jet and Ebony magazines, which had black and white pictures of stars and athletes and things like that, and I would pore over those stories. Church fans were another source of Black identity. This was a favorite would be one that featured a family that could have been my family, with a beautiful mom, handsome dad, and the brother that I never had. And then of course there's me with my little white gloves and my pigtails. But I developed a friendship with someone when I was about 10 years old. And when I went to her house, they had art. This is the exact picture that I happened to find online that was hanging in her house and that I fell in love with. The artist was John Wilson. He's from Brookline, Massachusetts. And I remember seeing these boys and I felt like, oh, these are like my friends. They were playing with paper boats in sort of the puddles of water that had developed in the curb after a rainfall. And then she had another piece, this one by Richard Yard. Do any of you know either of these artists? You should look them up, they're magnificent. This piece by Richard Yard seemed to me to be 3 kids and I was gonna be the 4th kid. I was coming down the street and they were waiting for me, and then the 4 of us together would figure out what kind of mischief we were going to get into that day. When I visited her house, in addition to visiting her, I visited these pieces of artwork and I inspected every detail. And I thought, I want to make art like that about us, about children. Children as inventors of joy and friendship. I love this quote because I believe that it's really true. Childhood impressions endure for a lifetime. And I never forgot about these pictures, even though I stopped visiting her house, or she grew up and went to college and had her own house and those sorts of things. People often ask me why collage. Why do I do collages? Well, back then, our childhood pastimes were dominated by paper dolls and color forms. We also had green stamp books, which involved tearing and gluing stamps in a book for prizes. We did puzzles of faraway places. Everything was on paper, and with simple tools, scissors, glue, tape, we created our imaginary worlds. And I guess I'm still that girl. And why children? They are my favorite subjects. I celebrate children as dreamers of fragile dreams that should be protected and nourished until they can be realized. I celebrate children as agents of their own future. This girl is meditating on her path, her golden path to the future. My palette is the palette of childhood. Primary reds, blues, and yellows, secondary oranges, purples, and greens, the colors from that first box of crayons I received in kindergarten. I celebrate children as learners. My aunt, Barbara Clark Elam, was a rare librarian in the 1960s. A graduate of Simmons University's prestigious College of Library Science, she loved reading and transferred that love to her children, including me. Books were my gateway into my love of art. I celebrate children as explorers. The summer of '62 shows a boy who's the first boy out on Saturday. You know, Saturday was a day for chores. After you did your chores, you went outside and you stayed outside all day, right? Finding things to do, making up games. If you were lucky enough to have a bicycle, letting everybody else ride it. And I just remember that as such a magical time in my life because children were free. There wasn't this sense of danger to childhood. You knew the streets that you couldn't go past, and so you see the grid here is showing the protective devices that parents said, don't cross Washington Street, there's too many cars. If I see you pass Mrs. Jones's house and she calls me, you're gonna be in trouble. And Mrs. Jones would call. I'm just telling you. You would get home and you could tell that, uh-oh, Mrs. Jones, she told the tale. On the opposite side, I wanted children to understand that no matter where you're planted right now, it's a big world. In fact, the title is Big World. And so when things are feeling tight around you, look up. There's all that sky, there's all that space, and that's representative of where we can dream to go. And once we have a dream, then we can put legs under it and we can get there. I celebrate children as owners and caretakers of their environment. So we adults, we think of ourselves as the important ones when it comes to community and safety and all of that, but children are involved too. They're members of our community. And in this piece, King of the Hill, I remember feeling that sovereignty as a child, like this is my neighborhood, this is my street, and who's that little boy? I don't know them. But of course you would make friends, right? But I think that sometimes we shield children or we don't involve them enough, their ideas. You know, they may have some crazy ideas, but that crazy idea might be just the one that we need. So I celebrate these children as caretakers of their environment. And I celebrate children as community builders through collaboration. I mean, children's games, especially this one, this is the first game you learn, Ring Around the Rosie. You hold hands, you're in a circle, you're sharing power. So these are great foundations for coming up and being adult community builders. We could be in a circle, we can hold hands, and we can make change together. Children are heirs to our customs and our culture, our values, and our morals. So what we're modeling is what they're observing. What they're observing is what they're absorbing, and what they're absorbing is what they're reflecting. That really takes, think about that. Because I hear a lot of people talk about, you know, young people, they should do this, and they're not doing that. But there's something in what we're doing that they're reflecting back to us. At least that's my opinion. And all of this under the loving oversight of parents, grandmas and nanas, uncles, aunts, and Mr. Sidneys in the neighborhood. like Mrs. Jones, as much as, she kind of bothered me sometimes. She was keeping an eye out for me. And if anything had happened to me, she would have come to my rescue, and she would have let my parents know. So these are the works of art that were hanging at J.P. Lick's, a popular, maybe the most popular ice cream shop in Boston. Does anybody know J.P. Lick's? Vanilla Scoop, Sundae, whatever. In my early days, before I started making these illustrations, I used to represent other artists and sell their work. I had a gallery because I thought of myself as not good enough to sell my own work. Anyway, many of them did not want their works hanging in restaurants. Oh no, let alone ice cream shops. But my theory was everyone eats. Art directors, collectors, museum staff, and more. And I was right. Sure enough, a woman from Candlewick Press came in one day with her daughter for a scoop of vanilla ice cream. Along with being willing to put my art wherever people traveled, I had also pledged to make my work accessible, affordable, and relatable. I wanted to highlight children. Those images and stories called me. Children as agents of their own lives, expressing joy and curiosity. Children as participants in social change. Children as essential members of our community. The woman, Ann Ashmore, an art director from Candlewick, sent me an email asking if I would be interested in illustrating a book. Well, I was floored. Back in college, I had taken a few classes in illustration and decided that I wasn't very good. There was a lot of precise drawing in pencil and perspectives and winding staircases with the horizon line, and my work was messy and loose, and to be honest, inconsistent. I changed my major, and I went on to graduate with a degree in photography. I didn't chase the dream. I locked it away and forgot about it. Now, here was an opportunity, the kind real illustrators dream of, and I wondered if I had the skills and talent to do a book. I also thought, why me? And should I? The answer came in this way. A few weeks later, Ann Ashmore sent a manuscript. At the time, the manuscript was called Singing for Freedom, the story of Fannie Lou Hamer. What? Fannie Lou Hamer? The amazing woman who helped people in Mississippi apply for their voting rights? The Fannie Lou Hamer that spoke in front of the Democratic Convention about injustices in Mississippi? The Fannie Lou Hamer who said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired"? I love her, and I admire her, but I'm not sure. Then I read on the first page that she was from Sunflower County, Mississippi, and that was it. Sunflowers are my icon. They are my jam. For years, this was my email signature image. I decorate my home with sunflowers. I give them as uplifting gifts, and I even wear a fragrance called Sunflower by Elizabeth Arden. I'm wearing it right now. And now, through the Roxbury Sunflower Project, I grow 10,000 sunflowers every year in my hometown. But that's a story for another time. So I said yes. At our first meeting, I wondered what made them think I could do this. Remember, I'd never illustrated a book before. Their confidence in me made me a little more confident, but I was still nervous. With the little I knew about being a professional illustrator, on that day, I expected to go in and receive a list of artwork to complete. Something like, page 1, Fannie Lou Hamer as a girl in a red dress. Page 2, Fannie Lou Hamer with a cow in the field. Page 3, Fannie Lou and her family at the dinner table, and so on. But instead, the art director said to me, "Akwa, you are a 100% partner in this project. Your artwork is just as important as the text, and we want to know, what do you think? How do you think the book should flow? What do you think this book should look like?" Both excited and terrified, I left that meeting thinking, either I'm the luckiest artist in the world or I'm about to fall flat on my face. I began to ponder these questions that I have up on the screen. How do I decide what to illustrate? How can I make this story personal for me? If I look at my life and Fannie Lou Hamer's life, she was born in 1917. She started picking cotton at age 6. She was beaten. These things have never happened to me. How will I find her authentic voice and viewpoint? What are the essential relationships in her life that help shape her? How does the Mississippi landscape play a role, as the urban landscape plays a role in the work that I showed you earlier? How do I invite the viewer into the story? And what are the key takeaways? Well, I found that what was in the manuscript was not enough. I had to do my own research. This is essential. I'm sure you will agree with me. So I read several biographies and combed through hundreds of photographs about Fannie Lou Hamer. There were no early photos to reference her as a child. So in this first image, I had to try to imagine her as a 6-year-old who had something of the spirit that she displayed to us as she became a civil rights icon. A photo session was not an affordable or practical option for a sharecropping family. I wondered how her destiny showed up even as a little girl. So I sketched a few different things. I like to use tissue paper in my work so that I can move things around. I can decide if something needs to be on the left, because with tissue paper you can flip it so it's facing in the other direction. It really gives you a lot of autonomy as you put together your composition. Other choices I considered were the medium. Even though I'm known as a collage artist, was that going to be appropriate for this story? What about the color palette? My previous palette of the primary colors from kindergarten didn't seem right for a story about a southern landscape that had such harsh conditions and yet at the same time such a divine light in it. What about texture and pattern? If you look through the book, which I hope you will later, you'll notice that there's a sunburst pattern throughout. What are the threads throughout the story that can take us from page 1 to page 32, and we know that it's all the same story in the same book? What about symbols? And what about the role of divinity in Fannie Lou Hamer's life? So what role did essential relationships play in her development? Through my own research, I found out about her close relationship with her mother, where she got the strength to do the things she did. I was wondering about that. How did she become that person? Well, I found out that her mother had determined that no one would beat her children. And as you can imagine, it was pretty common back then for children to be punished for the slightest thing, just like for even an adult black person. And her mother decided that that wasn't going to happen to her babies. So when she went into the field every day, in her lunch bucket was a pistol. Now, there's no story about her ever using it, but just imagine taking that on and saying, if it comes to this, if it comes to someone trying to beat my child, I am ready to give up my life, because that's probably what would have happened. These are the things, some of the things that Fannie Lou Hamer observed in her mother. At one point in her life, Fannie Lou Hamer looked around herself as a young child, and she said, you know, the farm next to us, this white family, they have milk, they have meat, they have shoes, and we work from sunup to past sundown, and we're hungry. And she said to her mother, why aren't we white so we can eat? I know that was a tough moment for her mom. But her mom said, listen, I want you to be proud to be a black child. Don't ever feel bad about that. And when you grow up, you learn as much as you can so you can help yourself and others. And then she took it a step further. She got her a black doll to put in her collection. Now, I'm trying to imagine what kind of black doll is she getting in 1914. As I think Fannie Lou Hamer was born in 1917, yeah. So let's say she was 10 years old. That's 1927. That predates Barbie. And I realized that the doll was probably a handmade doll. I forgot to advance my slide, y'all. Here's some sketches, some early sketches. So She had this doll made, and she probably used some scraps from Fannie Lou Hamer's clothing. And as I was working on the project, I'm thinking, what would a handmade doll look like? I never had one. I had Barbies, Chatty Cathy's, Patty Play Pals. Anybody remember those? I'm looking over here because I see all this gray hair over here. But in any case, I was thrifting, which is like my second most favorite thing to do, at one of my favorite shops in Salem, Mass. And I walk in, right here is a collection of handmade dolls. 30% of them are black handmade dolls. And I'm like, so that's where the doll came from. That was the model for this page. I call her Molly, and she stepped in to be my model right on time. I discovered that even in poverty, Fannie Lou Hamer had received a legacy from her parents. The ability to work hard, loyalty. When her brothers and sisters went north for the Great Migration to find work and opportunities, she stayed behind with her mother. Faith in God carried her through many illnesses and brutalities, and to our benefit and joy, the gift of song and oratory. She received an artistic legacy of music passed down from generations of women in her family. During the Freedom Summer voting rights efforts, when civil rights workers had been beaten, hosed, spit on, they wanted to go home. Some of them were young college students. They wanted to go home to their warm houses, to their food, and Fannie Lou Hamer could sing the courage right back into them with songs like Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around, Keep Your Eyes on the Prize, Hold On. This is what she was known for firing up rallies and getting people going, getting people brave, getting people courageous. Two of my favorite illustrations from the book are these two. I love a challenge, and I'd never done a cow before. You know, I'm a city girl, okay? And all of a sudden I'm doing cows and fields and cotton, and but I love a challenge, and I feel like, you know, it came out pretty good. I used my granddaughter. She actually was on the beach with a bucket of sand, but I used her in this piece, and I always try to get my family involved in my projects, you know, so years from now I can look back and I can say, that was you when you were a little girl, or see that little face over there, that's Uncle Sonny, or whatever. The second one is of an outhouse, which, again, city girl here, toilet, flushing, you know, that kind of thing. But my father's people were from Arkansas, and in the summer months, not every year, I would go to Arkansas and spend time with them, and they had an outhouse. And I have to tell you, I was terrified of it. There was something about that gaping hole that I just felt like, am I gonna get sucked down into it? And, you know, and sometimes, you know, in the middle of the night, you'd have to go out there. There were no light. The only light was starlight. But I was able to call upon my experience in Arkansas to help with this story. And I always look for a personal connection in every book that I do. What is it about me that's in this story that can be my sort of beginning thread to tie it to me? Surprisingly, this illustration is one that many people say is their favorite. And when I ask them why, they say it's because it's the truth. It's not sugar-coated. It's not through a gauzy curtain. This is the reality of what the Freedom Summer was all about. Fannie Lou Hamer and the people on the school bus that she was on who went to try to register to vote were detained and arrested because the bus was too yellow. Do y'all hear me? People made up laws on the spot to stop this voting rights from being a reality for America's black citizens. So here she is being beaten not only by a police officer, she's being beaten by another prisoner who's forced to beat her. He's forced to beat a woman that he has no gripe with, that he doesn't know, that probably he looks at as a mother, grandmother figure, and he's forced to beat her. This is the kind of brutality that while we don't want to stay grounded there, but we want to understand what can happen when we're not paying attention. When we're saying, oh, it's just that one incident. Oh, it doesn't really matter. These are the kinds of things that can happen. This is another favorite of mine. This is when brothers and sisters are getting on the train as part of the Black migration. And if you saw this, I guess you can see it from here, I kind of wove in some music to the piece because music was so important to Fannie Lou Hamer. So the arc of the story, the journey, the challenge, and the life purpose. The first image of Fannie Lou Hamer that I showed you earlier is her as a young girl looking into her life, looking forward to her life, and not knowing where her destiny will take her. And the book ends with Fannie Lou Hamer looking back over her life, wondering if she has done enough. And I think in the end she decides that she's done the best she could, though she wished she could do more, and she died at a fairly young age. So working on this book was a turning point in my life. It placed me solidly in the world of children's literature, winning several awards and honors. It also changed my personal work as I began to think more about the life of my grandparents and how they lived in Arkansas, just 200 miles away from Ruleville, Mississippi, where Fannie Lou Hamer was. And I created some works to honor them, their altars to my father's relatives in the South. And I guess you can see here, this is my grandfather, Commodore Hendricks, and the cotton that he picked and the Bible from which he took his divinity and his faith and his sustenance. And then the other piece is my Aunt Mary, who always wanted to leave the country and come to the city. And I imagined her sending letters back and forth to my father, her brother, but she was sort of trapped there. I wanted to honor her because I felt like she didn't get to live the life that she lived. And so by having this piece of her in the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, where thousands of people walked by and looked at her and admired her, I felt like I was giving her a little bit of what she had deserved. Since then, I've gone on to illustrate 8 other books, each one its own universe and its own university, as I learned from each story. According to James Baldwin, Nina Simone, and Toni Morrison, the artist has a primary role in society to reflect the times, to disturb the peace, and to help heal the world. I'm talking now to the would-be, should-be artist and the would-be, should-be writers. I see some young faces here. I don't know if any of you are interested in art, illustration, poetry, but the world needs your voice, I will tell you that. Children's literature gives us the opportunity to speak to the future, children. And what do we want them to know? What do we want them to be aware of? What do we want them to remember about history? Do we want them to dream? Do we want them to feel restricted and confined? This is what we have to decide as a society. One of the other books was What Do You Do with a Voice Like That? The story of another important Black woman in American history, Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. The manuscript begins by saying that Barbara Jordan was different. But what did the writer mean? Again, I had to do my own research and reading. Through that research, I found out that she was bigger, darker, and more confident than her siblings. And she had this voice, this crisp, booming, clear voice, even as a child. For those of you who might have seen the Watergate hearings and heard her speak, that's how she was speaking as a kid. So the question on the cover, what do you do with a voice like that? We could transfer that question to, what do you do with paintings like that? What do you do with, those long legs and long fingers? We all have something that we came here with, that we may often ask ourselves, what can I do with this? Well, she went on to do great things with that voice. But helping to make this story personal, I used my granddaughter again, and I asked her, what's a confidence stance for a young girl like you? How would you position yourself to project self-confidence and purpose, even though you're only 11 years old? And this is what she gave me. Her name is Song, and this is my heart and, my joy. She's 15 now. She's going to be 16 years old very soon. But this is what she gave me, and this is how it was used on the first spread of the book. Knowing now that I'm a part of the team for the entire book, there were opportunities for activism on the page. From my own research, I found out that Grandpa Patton, Barbara Jordan's grandfather, maternal grandfather, was the family member who was closest to her. When she was born, he was the first man to hold her and declare her beautiful, even though it wasn't beautiful. Black wasn't beautiful back then when she was born. When the family went to church on Sunday, Barbara spent the day with Grandpa Patton, helping him with his business and talking about all kinds of things. How could this not be a part of this book? I called the publisher and I said, how can this not be a part of this book? The influence of family is so central to what we become. And children need to know that their parents love and nurture them, but there are other people in their family who have gifts to share with them as well. So the publisher got in touch with the author, and the author said, okay. He knew about Grandpa Patton, but he was saving space as often as required. We have 32 pages to tell someone's life story. And so it's, we have to pick and choose. But also that's why someone else can write a story about Barbara Jordan and reflect on different things than Chris Barton did. So this was the spread that came out of that. The two of them at sunset talking in his horse-drawn buggy with all of his thrifting junk stuff in the back. I wish I had met him for that reason. Also, another thing that in this particular book, I read about how Barbara Jordan struggled with her studies. She was a law student at Boston University. And unfortunately, many Southern schools were not up to par. So she was an A+ student coming out of Texas. But coming here to Boston, she was in class with the children of lawyers and politicians and business people who spoke about torts and some of those other legal terms that I can't think of right now. They spoke this at the dinner table. She was hearing these terms for the first time. But rather than expose herself as needing help, because remember, she was probably the only Black woman in the class, and some people felt that she was there because of affirmative action and things like that, she would stay up into the wee hours of the morning, hidden away in the corner of a library at BU until her eyes burned. And she succeeded. I want young people to know that the people you're looking up to, they struggled, they suffered, they sacrificed. Even Beyonce gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning to work out. She takes 2 hours for makeup. She does voice lessons. Yes, she's phenomenal, she's fantastic, but she didn't get there just because she could sing or just because she could dance. So I asked, could we put that in the book? And we did. And this was the image. I wish I had the book here so that I could read you what Chris Barton wrote. By the way, Chris Barton was the writer for the book. He's a proud Texan, by the way. But anyway, oh my goodness. Thank you. How am I doing for time? Good? Okay. So one of the answers to what do you do with a voice like that, you give it more knowledge to work with. College opened Barbara's eyes to how the country was changing and how it wasn't. She learned how to find facts for herself, debate important issues, defend good ideas, and dismantle bad ones. Her law classes challenged her more than anything she'd known. She hid her struggles from her classmates, studying long and hard and out of sight. And when she graduated, yes, Barbara became a lawyer. I'll stop there. Another book that I want to just make mention of is this one, Saving American Beach. It's very different from the other two books in a lot of ways. When you think of environmentalists, whose name comes to mind, if any names come to mind? Well, Maureen Betch, the beach lady, as she was called down in Florida, was an environmentalist before it was popular, before people even knew it was a thing. She was from a wealthy Black family, the great-granddaughter of Florida's first Black millionaire, Abraham Lincoln Lewis. Abraham Lincoln Lewis was the leader of an insurance company. And the insurance companies in the South started, the Black ones, because white insurance companies would not bury Black people. But it was a ticket to prosperity for many people. And he decided that he wanted his family to be able to go to the beach and have relaxation without humiliation. Because then the beaches were segregated. And do you know how they were segregated? There was an orange rope out into the ocean. And on one side were white children, and on the other side, Black children, probably looking at each other, not understanding why they can't play together. But this is what adults put on them. So in the first spread, I show Maureen as a creature of the ocean. She loved that beach, and he bought it the same year she was born. He named it American Beach because he felt like this is what an American beach should be, a place where anyone can come. And people came from all around the country. Black folks drove down from Detroit, because who doesn't want to have an experience of relaxation without humiliation, where there are no colored-only signs, or go to the back, or you're not allowed here. In the first spread, you'll notice a different palette of colors for this book. So every book, as I said, is its own universe. And I think the color tells a story too. Next, we introduce her essential relationship with her great-grandfather, Abraham Lincoln Lewis. And perhaps one day they stood there looking out at the ocean from the beach that he had purchased so that his grandbabies could enjoy and frolic without fear. Letting the reader know in this spread that in the absence of a Black History Museum, she started her own on a van that her sister, Johnetta Cole, gave her to live in. Maureen Betch was wealthy, but she gave away all of her money for environmental causes. She wanted to save the birds, insects, and animals on Florida's beaches, and she worked for years to get the president to sign into order making American Beach a national treasure. Because of the legacy from her great-grandfather, she was able to do things that many people are not able to do because she had money. And finally, a portrait of her at her beloved sand dune Nana, which is a physical feature of American Beach, where orange butterflies were released when she was memorialized. Orange was her favorite color, and she wore orange fingernails, orange earrings, and she loved the monarch butterfly. A lot of these facts I found from my own research, and they were not in the original manuscript. Illustrations should tell a visual story on their own, as well as complementing the author's text. Illustrations enhance the text, but also show things that aren't said. You heard that saying, show, not say. As I come to a close, I want to share a shining moment in my life of having a solo show of my children's book illustrations at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. It is one of the top 10 museums in the world. Book illustrations are art, and are, through shows like this, are taking their place alongside the great art of the world. This was a special opportunity because I live less than 15 minutes away from the museum. As a child, I took classes there on Saturday, and we planted 3,000 sunflowers on the front lawn in 2022. But mostly it's special because I got to show, not say, what inclusion at the museum looks like. I asked that my girl from Golden be blown up floor to ceiling as a welcome for people. And let me just go back to this. And they put her on the front of the museum. So I imagine her as a representative of the Roxbury neighborhood, skipping up the stairs to the museum and saying, come on, guys, and everybody is coming in, and everybody is feeling welcome, and everybody is feeling relevant. This is connected to a story of a group of Dorchester students who came to the museum. I don't know if any of you heard this story. And they felt that they were profiled. From the time they got there, security followed them around. They heard some unkind comments from another visitor. And so the state of Massachusetts developed a memorandum of understanding with the museum about what they were going to do about people not feeling welcome just because of the color of their skin. I'm a part of making that change. This exhibition was a part of making that change. So it was important to me to put children, again, front and center. If we want to change tomorrow, they're the ones that are going to do it. So here's some of the artwork that you saw earlier in the museum setting. Here's the Fannie Lou Hamer book. There were 4 books featured. And this all happened during the pandemic. So the show was postponed 3 times. And at a certain point, I was like, this is not going to happen. I need to just pinch myself and just get over it. People at the museum had been sent home. Some people had quit. Some people had been fired. So when I was having meetings there was nobody in the museum except for these guys, a group of teen curators who were training to learn about art and be curators. And so I invited them to be on my team and help me put this show on. And they joined me. Each one of them took a book. There's actually one woman that's not shown. They each took a book, they read it, they took it apart, and they wrote about it. And it's their wall text that describes each of those books. And I'm telling you, they killed it. They really did. And there's Fannie Lou Hamer. So as of this moment, I feel like I've kept my early pledge to make my work accessible, relatable, affordable, and beautiful in a way that I hadn't imagined. Illustrating children's book allows me to do all of these things. What is more accessible than a book in a library? What is more relatable than stories of childhood? We've all had that. What's more affordable than free with your library card? And what's more beautiful than a mirror reflection of ourselves? I didn't chase the dream of being an illustrator. I locked it away. But sometimes the dream chases you. And I'm so glad that it did. Thank you. Thank you all. So I would love to hear from you. Doesn't have to be a question. Could be just something that you want to share with the people that are here today. And somebody's ready. He's ready.
I could sit here all evening listening. Very profound. You've spoken to the hearts and minds of everyone. And I noticed how attentive the young ones were. You very seldom see that. You spoke across the color lines. You just touched everyone deeply. And thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to take a sip of water. Anyone else? Yes, Jason.
Can you tell me about the work you're doing with, that I read about with the Museum of Fine Arts of Boston with Artmobile? Is that what
It's Massachusetts College of Art and Design.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you for asking. So I also have the great fortune of working in the arts. So thinking back to my parents again, who are like, oh my God, how is she going to get a job? I have a job in the arts. I work at Massachusetts College of Art and Design, and I run a program called Spark the Artmobile, and it is Mass Art's mobile arm. So we have a van, a very beautiful van, and we take it places stocked with art supplies, and we develop art and design experiences in partnership with other organizations. So one of the things that we do that's very successful is our paint night experiences. And that's where we have up to 60 people, many of them families, coming together to paint. We invite an artist to do a lesson with them to sort of teach people, okay, this is how I approach abstract art, or this is how I approach a portrait, or this is how. And then my student team, they're the engine of this project. We are like the TAs. We go around and sit with people, and we encourage them to allow themselves to self-express and to not judge themselves, to not shut down their own creativity. I used to have a friend who came to a couple of paint nights, and he was like, you tell those people their work is beautiful, and some of it's just like splatters on a paper. I said, yes, but we can celebrate that splatter, that they did that they showed up, and they mixed that color. You know, there's always the little pieces of encouragement. I can tell you, I wasn't a great artist in high school, you know, but somebody encouraged my effort, and that's what helped me grow. So paint nights is a big thing. We do poetry nights where we do poetry exercises, and I can tell you the most exciting thing is for someone to walk in and say, I hate poetry, and they walk out with a masterpiece that they've written themselves. Or somebody who says, I can't draw a straight line. We tell them we don't allow straight lines in paint nights, and then they go home with something that they feel truly proud of. So that's a big part of what we do there, but we do events. During COVID, we had to really shift because we were doing all in-person stuff, and all of a sudden, the libraries where we work all shut down, after-school programs all shut down, community centers. So we shifted to virtual, and we were surprised to learn that we could create the same kind of intimate setting on Zoom. And we had to figure out how to use the thing with the camera and all of that kind of stuff, but we did, and we kept it going. And I think the seniors in particular, because most of our audiences are intergenerational, the seniors in particular who were so isolated really were happy that even though they were looking at a square on their computer, they felt like they were a part of a community, that they had people to talk to. And we used the chat to have conversations and ask questions and things like that. So I love what I do. This is why I'm not retired yet, because I love my job, but the students also, many of them come from, other states. They come from rural environments. They come from environments that are not diverse, and they self-select to be a part of this program where they know they're going to be going into Boston's neighborhoods and participating in partnership with organizations. So I'm very proud of them as well. Thank you for that. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah. I see a young hand. All right. So I would say my favorite is the one that I just finished. Unfortunately, I can't show it to you because it's not here, but it's the book about Coretta Scott King. Do you know who Coretta Scott King is? So she was the wife of Martin Luther King Jr. And he's famous, right? But what people don't always know is that Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King were partners. And he couldn't do the things he did without the things she did. And now the world is just waking up to find out that many of the male leaders from that era had these incredible wives who not only raised their children, but helped them with their speeches, helped them with their philosophy. And so I get to celebrate Coretta Scott King in this next book. And what's really unique about it is it's written by her. So all of these other books were written by authors, people who researched a story, wrote about it, but this is what she wanted you to know about her in the book that I'm doing. So I hope you will check it out. Thank you for your question. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and for your wonderful illustrations.
Thank you.
Thank you especially for doing it in a library, because I think it's a key to having, I know they're books, but your art being in a library for people to see while they're in reading or doing other things. And you, I first knew about this, I mentioned to somebody, because I was walking in the woods just down near the lake down here, and there's a story walk, and all your pictures are out there.
I have to see that tomorrow, yeah.
And I hope you will go, because it's wonderful, it's just out there. mentioned earlier, who showed us some pictures by John Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
And there are two pictures of his, one called Roz and another with the man and the little child.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful. In a gallery at the University of Vermont called the H. Lawrence McCrory Gallery of Multicultural Art.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. McCrory was a great activist in his picture. When he retired, they made this gallery in his honor because there was no multicultural art
Right.
in the university.
Yeah.
And he wanted the pictures to be in an area where students would come to read and study. So it would be around them. And it's the library, the Howe Library at the University of Vermont. And some of those pictures are there. All I can say is I wish we could have some more pictures up there.
It's not too late. Yes.
But I want everybody in this room to know that there is this gallery. It's in the university. It's a group, and you walk in, and it's just in the library. And to emphasize how important it is to have pictures, have artwork in books, in libraries, where everybody
Can enjoy.
see them. And so I thank you again
Absolutely.
for your terrific work here. And I'm very excited about all these books.
Thank you so much. I agree with you, and I love that libraries have evolved to, when I was coming up, you had to be quiet in there, and now libraries are like community centers where you can talk and you can be on the computer, you can do so many different things. Children are playing. Libraries have evolved. They've kept their core mission, but they've expanded on it in a way that's appropriate for today. And I also really appreciate your comments talking about the book banning. We all have to be a part of making sure that this does not continue. I read somewhere where the folks that are doing this are using our own tools. So let's say you create a book of top 10 books about, Black Americans. That's the list that they go after. So we're, and to say that someone's life story should be banned just sounds crazy to me. These are things that really happened in our country, and if we don't guard against it, they will happen again and again and again. So I appreciate you opening up with that. I really do. Yes, sir.
I wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for offering your gift to our community, and it's such a blessing to be able to engage in this way. We all benefit from having an opportunity to have such a diverse array of energy reflected in such a valuable experience to share with us and with children. One thing I tell my daughter specifically, because I've heard this all through history, is that when people say, we were treated this way because of the color of our skin. It's not really, that's not really the reason. Because it doesn't have to do with the color of our skin. Those are our God-given colors. It's the perception, perspective of the people who are mistreating us.
Absolutely.
Well, right, it's important to distinguish those things.
I thank you for that, because language is so crucial. Slave versus enslaved is a shift that we're making. So can you just say that one more time, nice and loud for everyone?
I was saying that oftentimes we hear we're mistreated because of the color of our skin or some other characteristic. It doesn't have anything to do with our characteristics. It's because of the perspectives, the perception of people who are mistreating us, who are attributing something negative to something that's inherent about us. Saying that it's because of the color of our skin makes it seem as if our skin warrants mistreatment, which is a lie, that's false. So you should be very careful when you hear that and address that when you hear it. As we've heard it said from Martin Luther King, from many different countries.
Right.
We understand what they meant, but it's important to distinguish those. There's nothing wrong with the color of our skin.
Right.
It's the misperception of people who are mistreated, who look differently.
Right.
They that allows for that.
Yeah.
The question I wanted to ask you, though, is what would you say to young artists who are just starting out on their path, who want to express themselves and share things that are powerful, maybe just are just getting into that part of their journey? What would you encourage them or advise them to do?
Well, I would give them advice that I don't follow as much as I wish I did, which is to draw every day, to write every day. Give yourself the best of your day. if it's a page in your journal or a page in your sketchbook, you don't have to give yourself a lot of direction. Just keep your skill going. I don't know if you, any of you have read Malcolm Gladwell's essay about the 10,000 hours. That's what you need for mastery. And there's no time like the present to get started on that. So I would say give the best of your day to your art self. And then the other thing is read about other artists and their perspectives. I love artist biographies because I'm always surprised at like the person behind the artwork that I love and how did they get to make that art? What were the ingredients, like Matisse? Why did he make collages? Well, he was in a wheelchair and he wasn't going to stop creating. So he found another way to create that actually turned out to revolutionize some of the ways that artists were working in that day. So it's good to read biographies. That's another piece of it. You only asked for one, but I gave you two. Thank you for the question. Yes?
I was wondering, what most excites you about
Oh my goodness. I just love making art. I love color. I love ideas, okay? So right now I'm working on a piece of, remember the piece with the children in the Ring Around the Rosie? So now that's kind of like sticking with me, this idea that one of the first games that children play is this circular game. And it doesn't matter whether you're in Alabama or Canada or Argentina, this is a game that kids play all over the world. So how does that foundation of play affect us as adults? And so I'm playing around with that idea. So ideas and skill and desire make art. It could be writing a poem about that. And most artists do more than one thing. I also want to tell you that. Like a lot of poets are also painters, but they might not show their paintings. Like Louis Armstrong made collages, but who knew that? When he was in the hotel room between concerts, he would cut stuff out and tape it down, and they're amazing. But he just did it to relax. There are artists that write poems. So don't confine yourself. If you don't feel like confining yourself, do whatever you want to do. And for parents of kids, I say, don't hover over your art kids. Just give them their supplies, give them their space, and let them show you who they are. Don't, I meet parents who are like, well, I want to do this, and I want, no, this is for them. You just support, That's what my parents did for me. They didn't stop me. They didn't encourage me, but they didn't stop me. So anyway, thank you for your question, though. Are you an aspiring artist of any kind?
I write poetry.
Okay. Any particular subject that you write about?
Not really.
No? Okay. Move around. I like to do haikus because I can fit a haiku in the morning. Have you ever written a haiku? That's the 575 syllables. Yeah. So that's what I do. Any other young artists in the audience? Yes? I can't see you back there. Hey, and what do you like to do? Okay. I do, and I love abstract art. I don't show it, but it's something that I really enjoy. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that question. Do you do abstract art? Yeah, it's very expressive. And really, all art is an abstraction, right? Because all art is just like color in different spots. But sometimes we try to make it look more real, but it's really all an abstraction of what we see with our eyes. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I really appreciate everything you have said. And were I to live many, many more years longer, I'd like to see the book that is written about you and the life that you live. Because the story that you tell about Benny and the Hammers was really
thank you. I appreciate you. Yeah. Maybe one day when I'm long gone, somebody will say, there once was an artist named Aqua, and they'll find something to rhyme with that. Well, folks, what do you think? We done? Okay. I so appreciate your time and attention. And again, Fletcher Free Library, it's been amazing. I'm proud of you guys.